Sheep bells, small and unhurried, reach you first, drifting up out of the darkness below the path, each note a little rounder than the last, as if the flock itself were falling asleep note by note. You cannot see the animals yet. You only hear them, scattered somewhere down the slope among the rocks, and you smell them too, that warm, oily sweetness of wool grease and lanolin that hangs around a flock at night, the way wood smoke hangs around a hearth. It is a smell older than any story you know, and it tells you, before anything else does, that you are standing on a mountain where shepherds have walked for a very long time. The mountain is called Latmos, and it rises in the east of the Greek world, above a gulf that has long since gone quiet, and its stone is pale, and its paths are narrow, and the moon is coming up behind it now, slow and enormous, the color of a lamp seen through linen. You feel the day's heat still stored in the limestone under your feet, a faint warmth rising through your sandals, even as the air on your shoulders cools, and when you step off the path to let the last light fade, you crush a low cushion of wild thyme underfoot, and the smell of it lifts around your ankles, dry and green and peppery, and mingles with the lanolin and the dust. Breathe that in for a moment. Let your shoulders come down. There is nowhere you need to be tonight, except here on this warm stone, in this cooling air, walking slowly toward a story about the one mortal in all of Greek myth who was allowed to stop. Before we go up to him, a small, quiet request offered the way one shepherd hands another a water skin. If these long walks through old stories help you sleep, you might leave a gentle mark of approval and stay subscribed for the next one. And if you have a moment before your eyes close, write down where in the world you are lying tonight and what hour your clock shows, so that all of us drifting off across so many different darknesses can know we are, in a sense, one flock on one hillside. Do it drowsily, or not at all. The mountain does not mind either way. The story belongs to a shepherd named Endymion. Say the name slowly, the way the old tellers would have. 4 soft syllables, Endymion, a name that seems to lie down in the middle and rest. In the oldest layers of the tale, he is exactly what you would expect to find on this mountain. A young man who follows sheep, who knows every spring and every shadow on Latmos, who sleeps out under the open sky more nights than he sleeps under a roof. And yet, the story never quite lets him be ordinary. Some traditions insist he was no simple herdsman at all but a king, ruler of Elis, far away in the west of Greece, a man who counted athletes and olive groves among his cares, and who somehow ended his story here, on this eastern mountain, wrapped in sleep. Others make him a hunter, and a few make him something stranger still, a son or grandson of Zeus himself, royal blood thinned down into a boy with a crook and a dog and a hillside of bells. You do not need to choose between them tonight. Stories this old are like the mountain's paths, many of them, braided, all leading more or less upward, and we will walk several of them before the night is through. For now, picture him as the shepherd, because that is how this mountain remembers him. It is evening, the same evening you are standing in, and he is bringing the flock down from the high pasture to a fold of dry stone walls below a cave mouth, and you fall in beside him without a word, because in stories told at this hour, no one is ever a stranger. You match his pace, which is slow, because a flock at dusk cannot be hurried, only persuaded. You hear him clicking his tongue at the stragglers, a small dry sound like a pebble tapped on a pot, and you hear the bells answer, and underneath it all you hear the mountain itself, which is to say almost nothing, a breath of wind in the thorn oaks, the far-off complaint of a night bird, stone cooling and ticking somewhere like an oven settling after the bread is out. His face, when you finally see it in the last violet light, is the kind of face the old poets kept apologizing for describing, because their words never seemed adequate to them. They said he was the most beautiful of mortal men, and then, having said it, they mostly gave up and talked about the moon instead, which tells you something. Beauty in these stories is rarely a reward. It is more like weather, something that happens to a person, something the gods notice the way you notice a white stone on a dark path. Endymion does not seem aware of it, or perhaps he has simply stopped thinking about it. the way you stop hearing a stream you live beside. He counts his sheep through the gate of the fold, touching each broad woolly back as it shoves past his knees, and the lanolin smell rises thick and comforting, and the bells knock together in the crowded space. And when the last ewe is in, he ties the gate with a strip of hide and stands still for a moment, doing nothing at all, which is a shepherd's way of finishing a day. You settle near him on a flat rock that still holds the sun's warmth like a loaf holds the ovens. Below you, the slope falls away in terraces of shadow, and far off, westward, there is a faint gleam where the water of the gulf lies flat as poured metal, catching what is left of the sky. He shares what he has, which is bread with a hard crust and a soft heart. A handful of olives, a little sour wine cut with spring water, and you eat slowly without talk while the first stars come out one at a time deliberately, as if someone very patient were lighting them. And it is here, in this ordinary peace, that the story plants its first strange seed, so quietly you could miss it. The wind stops, not gradually, the way wind usually dies at dusk, but all at once, between one breath and the next, the way a room goes still when someone important steps into the doorway. The thorn oaks stop whispering. The dust settles. Even the flock, which is never entirely silent, seems to hold its bells still. Endymion lifts his head, not alarmed, only attentive, the way an animal lifts its head, and you feel the hair stir on your arms, because a calm this complete is not weather. To ancient listeners, a sudden hush like this meant presence, meant that something immortal had turned its attention toward the place where you were sitting. And every telling of this tale keeps that hush somewhere near the beginning. Like a held breath, the whole story is waiting to let out. Then a bird calls once, from the crag above the cave, a low, churring, liquid note, a nightjar, the bird that hunts in the dark and sleeps all day. The bird the shepherds here say drinks from the goats and belongs half to this world and half to the other one. Endymion smiles at the sound, because to him it is only the mountain talking in its sleep, and the wind returns as gently as it left, and the moment folds itself away. But you remember it. Keep the hush and the nightbird in your pocket as we walk on, because stories like this one pay their debts, and both will come back before the end. He beds down that night, as he does most nights in the dry season, on a shelf of stone at the mouth of the cave, on a mat of cut brush with his cloak rolled under his head, his dog curled at his feet like a knot in old rope. And this is the moment to lift our eyes from him. Slowly, the way you lift your eyes from a page when someone lights a lamp across the room, because while he sleeps, the moon has cleared the shoulder of the mountain, and the moon, in this story, is not a thing. She is someone. Her name is Selene, not Artemis, though later ages would tangle the two of them together until their edges blurred, the huntress with her silver bow, and the older, stranger lady of the moon itself. Selene comes from the generation before the Olympian gods, a Titan's daughter, sister of Helios who drives the sun, and of Eos who opens the dawn. And where her siblings blaze and announce themselves, Selene only crosses, quiet as frost forming, from one rim of the sky to the other. The old hymns give her a chariot and a pair of long-maned horses. Some say winged, some say white as new wool, and they give her a crown that is not made of anything, only of light. And they say that when she has bathed in the river of ocean and puts on her far-gleaming robe and rises, the air itself grows wide around her. You have seen her 1,000 times, and perhaps never once thought of her as lonely. The Greeks did. Of all their bright divinities, she is the one who works entirely at night, when the temples are shut and the sacrifices are cold. The one goddess almost nobody stays awake to watch. So picture her crossing now, high over the quiet gulf, her horses stepping through nothing as calmly as yours would step through shallow water, the light going out ahead of her like something spilled. Below her, the world is asleep, and she knows its sleeping face better than any god knows its waking one. She has seen every roof of every village with its lamps put out. She has seen harbors full of ships riding at anchor, all their oars shipped, all their sailors dreaming. She has seen armies asleep beside their spears, and children asleep beside their mothers, and old men asleep beside their long lives. And she has crossed above all of it, night after night after night, in a silence so old that she has stopped noticing it is silence. That is the shape of her existence, and the old tellers understood exactly what they were doing when they made her story turn on the one thing she could never have. Everything that sleeps, she watches. Nothing that sleeps is hers. And then, on a night no different from 10,000 other nights, her eye catches on Latmos. Perhaps it is the pale stone that draws her. The way this mountain of all mountains gives her light back, almost as brightly as water does, every ridge and boulder rinsed silver, so that crossing above it is like crossing above a second, dimmer moon. Perhaps it is the hush you remember from the evening, still hanging faintly about the slope like the smell of rain that has not fallen. Or perhaps it is simply the cave mouth and the shelf of stone and the sleeping figure on it. She slows. Understand how strange that is. The sun cannot slow. The dawn cannot linger. The whole discipline of the sky is that it keeps moving, and yet the moon that night hangs over one shoulder of one mountain in the east for longer than she should, long enough that, far away, an astronomer of some sleepless city might have frowned at his charts and wetted his pen and written down a small anomaly he could not explain. What she sees is a young man asleep on his back, with one arm thrown up over his head, his face turned toward the sky, as if the sky had called him just before he went under, his lips barely parted, his breathing so slow and even that at first she reads him the way she reads the stones, as a beautiful, motionless feature of the mountain. Then his chest rises, and something in her, older than the Olympians, older than names, leans down toward that small movement. The way you lean toward a fire in a cold room. The poets tried for centuries to say what happened in that moment and settled, mostly, on the simplest words available. She saw him, and she loved him, as if it were one motion, not two. She comes down. This is the image the ancient world could never let go of, the one carved on tombs and painted inside drinking cups and whispered at the ends of wedding songs, the moon leaving her chariot, leaving her horses standing in the empty air like saddled patience itself, and stepping down onto the flank of Latmos with light pooling around her ankles. Where she walks, the time casts two shadows. The dew comes early, silvering the wool of the sleeping flock, beating on the dog's whiskers, and the dog, who would wake snarling for any wolf, any thief, any god of the loud daylight kind, only sighs and pushes his nose deeper under his tail, because what is approaching smells of nothing except cold water and distance. She crosses the fold. She stops at the shelf of stone, and for a long time, doing no more than you are doing now, she watches a mortal man breathe. One reading of this tale, favored by those who like their myths tidy, says that this was the whole of it for many nights, that she came down again and again, only to look, that the first and longest chapter of the moon's love was simply attention. She learned his face the way she had learned the face of the sleeping world, but slowly this time, on purpose, in detail. The small scar on his forearm where a ram had caught him against a wall, the way his fingers curled loosely around nothing, around the ghost of a crook, the way his breathing changed when he dreamed, quickening for a few heartbeats like a lamp flaring in a draught, then settling again. She counted his breaths the way misers are said to count coins, unwilling to lose one. And every night, before the sky in the east began to weaken, she would step back up into her chariot, colder than when she left it, and finish her crossing too fast. And the fishermen of the Gulf would notice the moon setting early and mend their nets by lamplight, grumbling, never guessing they had been robbed of light by a sleeping shepherd's face. And what of him all this while? Here the tellers begin to disagree gently, the way old friends disagree about a summer 40 years gone. In some versions, he never wakes at all during those first visits and knows nothing, and the love is entirely hers, one-sided as moonlight itself, which touches everything and is touched by nothing. But there is another softer thread, and since you are lying comfortably and in no hurry, we can follow it a little way. In this thread, Endymion begins to dream of her, not knowing her name, Not understanding what is happening, he begins to dream, night after night, of a woman made of the kind of light that does not warm, standing at the edge of his sleep the way a figure stands at the edge of a doorway, deciding whether to come in. In the dreams, she never speaks. She only watches him with an expression he cannot name, because it is the expression of someone watching the one thing they cannot keep, and no mortal has ever needed a word for that. He wakes from these dreams later and later in the morning, heavy-limbed and slow, with silver light seeming still to cling to the inside of his eyelids. And the other shepherds joke that Endymion is half in love with sleep itself, that he hurries the flock down earlier each evening, that he has begun to look forward to closing his eyes the way other young men look forward to festivals. They are joking. The mountain is not. His mother notices it first, in the tellings that give him a mother, how her son has begun to seem rinsed in something, pale and shining and abstracted, like a man who spends his nights beside a bright window. An old shepherd, the kind of figure these stories always keep leaning on a staff somewhere near the fire, notices the flock instead. The ewes are calm, he says, too calm, and the dew falls early on Endymion's pasture and nowhere else, and the nightjar has moved its churring song down from the crags to the rock right above the boy's cave, where it sings all night like a sentry that has taken a liking to its post. Sheep, the old man says, do not lie quiet under a wheeling sky unless something is standing guard that they trust more than the dog. He spits respectfully, in the manner of old men warding off what they half hope will come anyway, and he says the word goddess into the fire quietly, and no one laughs. Later poets added a scene here that the earliest tellers may never have known, and it is too lovely to leave out of a night like this. In it, Endymion wakes, just once, in the deep of night, without moving, in the way you sometimes surface from sleep, so gently that the surfacing itself feels like a dream. He opens his eyes, and she is there, sitting on the end of the stone shelf, with her light turned low the way a considerate person shades a lamp, watching him. And because he is more asleep than awake, he is not afraid. Fear needs the daylight mind, and his is far away, folded up somewhere with his sandals. They look at each other for a while across that little distance, which is also, of course, the distance between the earth and the moon, and at last he asks her, in a voice furred with sleep, whether she is a dream, and she considers the question with the seriousness of someone who has had a very long time to think about what is real, and answers that she is not sure what she is when she is this close to him. It is the only conversation the two of them are ever given in any version of the tale, and even here, it may be no more than his dream retold as fact, and the story lets it blur on purpose, because this is a tale about the border country between waking and sleeping, and it keeps its own borders soft. You can feel, though, even lying still, even with your eyes closed, that a story like this cannot balance forever on so fine a point. A goddess cannot simply visit. Attention on that scale bends things, the way a great stone bends the stretched cloth it rests on, and the world begins to notice. The fishermen with their early setting moon, the astronomer with his anomaly, the old shepherd with his too quiet ewes. And higher up, in the bright halls where the daylight gods keep their long accounts, someone notices too. Some traditions claim it was Helios, her own brother, who mentioned it first, mildly, at some gathering of immortals, the way family will, asking why his sister lately took so long about her nights. Others say nothing needed saying, because there is one god from whom no attention can be hidden, and his name is Zeus, and his notice is a weather all its own. Either way, the moon's secret ended, as all secrets in these stories end. It was seen, and the seeing changed everything, which is a thing you already know, and can rest inside, while the story climbs the last cold stretch toward its center. Before the summons, though, before the bright halls and the terrible kindness that waits in them, the story pauses on the mountain for one more season, and so will we. Because it is in this season that Selene understands the true shape of her trouble, and it is not discovery she fears. Gods are discovered constantly. Their loves are the gossip of the world. No, what she has begun to see, coming down night after night to the shelf of stone, is something quieter and far worse, and she sees it in the smallest possible things. The scar on his forearm has faded, the way scars do. There is a new roughness on his hands, the honest wear of ropes and stone walls and winters. And one night, in the loose dark hair at his temple, spread on the rolled cloak like weed on a beach, she finds a single strand of gray. 1. She looks at it for a very long time. You know this moment, or you will. It is the moment of standing in front of something ordinary, a photograph, a doorway, a sleeping face, and feeling time move, actually feeling it. The way you feel a boat move when you look up from the deck to the shore. He is 20-some years old and entirely alive, and to her, that is exactly the sorrow, because she is uncountable thousands of years old and cannot stop being alive. And the arithmetic between those two sentences is the cruelest in the world. Mortal means dying, but that is not really what it means. She has watched the sleeping world long enough to know better. Mortal means changing. It means that the boy asleep on the stone is a slow event, a wave in the act of breaking over decades, and that every night she comes down to him, she is visiting a slightly different man, and that the direction of the difference is fixed, and that no God, however great, has ever turned it around. She could love him gray. She knows that. She could love him bent and spotted and deaf to the bells, love him down to the very last of him, and it would be a good love. But she has also stood, more often than any other divinity, in the particular silence that hangs over a village where someone has died in the night, that stillness inside stillness. And she knows she would one day cross this sky and look down and find the shelf of stone empty and keep crossing, because the sky's discipline is that it keeps moving, and she would keep crossing above an empty mountain for the rest of forever. Immortals do not risk grief the way mortals do, a handful of decades of it. When an immortal takes a wound, the wound is as long as they are. To listeners in the ancient world, this dilemma meant something quite precise, because their stories had already mapped every bad road out of it. A goddess had gone before her, and Selene knew the tale as well as they did, for it belonged to her own sister. Eos, the dawn, had loved a mortal man, Tithonus, and had done the bold thing, the daylight thing, had gone straight to Zeus and asked that her beloved live forever. And Zeus had granted exactly what she asked, which is the oldest trap in the world's oldest stories. She had asked for endless life and forgotten to ask for endless youth. And so Tithonus lived and aged and lived and withered and lived, shrinking and drying through the centuries in a bright chamber by the springs of ocean, until his voice was a papery cheer in the shadows, and the tellers, unable to bear it, finally let him dwindle into a cicada, singing thinly forever at the edge of his lover's mourning. Every listener around every fire knew that story. So when they heard the moon fall in love with a mortal, they leaned forward, because they understood the riddle she was now holding in the dark above Latmos. Death takes him from you. Deathless life destroys him in your arms. Name the third road. Selene's answer, when it comes to her, arrives not as an idea, but as a picture. And the story has been showing you the picture all night. He is lying on his back with one arm over his head. His breathing is slow. His face is turned to the sky, unlined, unguarded, 20-some years old. Every change she dreads happens on the far side of waking, out in the sun where the ropes roughen his hands and the years hunt him. Nothing has ever changed him here. Sleep is where time loses his scent. And so the thought forms, in whatever cold silver language the moon thinks in, as simple and enormous as a full moonrise. Let him stay. Not live forever, with all the ruin that request carries hidden in its hem. Not die with the empty shelf and the endless crossings after. Just this, exactly this, the picture in front of her held. Let him be asleep and young and breathing and hers to watch. Always. The moment she has thought it, she cannot unthink it, and the next night, or the next year, for God's measure urgency strangely, she leaves her chariot standing in the empty air, not over Latmos, but over Olympus, and goes in where the light is loud to ask. Hold that image of her at the threshold, Because here the story splits like a path around a boulder, and honest telling means walking both sides. Not every ancient voice agreed that the sleep was Selene's idea at all. There is a harder, older-feeling version, kept for us by a handful of dusty summarizers, in which Endymion earns his fate. And earns is exactly the word they want you to hear. In this telling, he is not merely noticed by the divine, but invited into it. Zeus, they say, favored the beautiful young king, welcomed him among the immortals as a guest, let him breathe the bright air of Olympus itself, and Endymion, being mortal and full of daylight, made the mortal mistake. He looked too long at Hera, the queen of everything, and wanted what he looked at. Some say it went no further than wanting, and that a cloud was shaped in her likeness to test him, and that he embraced the cloud, which is as sad an image as the old world ever made, a man with his arms full of weather. For that, the judgment. Zeus did not burn him, as he burned others who overreached, for reasons the tellers do not explain, and perhaps could not. He chose a punishment with mercy folded inside it, or a mercy with punishment folded inside it, and no one has ever been able to get the fold out. Eternal sleep, never to die, never again to open the eyes that had looked where they should not. You can feel how differently that version sits in the chest. The same still figure on the same stone shelf, and yet now the stillness has a shadow in it. Now the unlined face is a sentence being served. The moon in this telling comes later, finds him already sleeping, already sealed, and loves what she finds, which makes her love a kind of afterword. Tender graffiti on a closed door. Scholars have gone back and forth for a very long time over which telling is elder, the punishment or the gift, and the argument is not likely to end while there are scholars, because the evidence is a scatter of lines and fragments. And fragments are quiet things, and you can arrange quiet things in almost any order you please. What matters for us tonight is that the ancient world kept both. It looked at the sleeping shepherd and could not decide what it was looking at, blessing or exile. And instead of deciding, it told the story again. Remember that. It is the deepest thing on this mountain, and we will come back to it when the bells have gone quiet. But let us give the night to the gentler road, since sleep is where you are headed to, and follow Selene in through the doors of Olympus. The halls are everything her nights are not, gold where she is silver, noise where she is hush, and the gods look up as she enters the way daybirds look up when an owl crosses the afternoon, with the particular attention reserved for someone seen out of their element. She does not often come here. She belongs to the older families, and her work keeps different hours, and so her arrival is itself a kind of omen, and the bright talk dims as she crosses the floor with her cold light pooling on the gold, all the way to the high seat, where the king of gods sits with the world's weather drifting through his beard, watching her come, knowing already because he always knows already, and waiting anyway, because being asked is a form of tribute, and even Zeus does not refuse tribute. What passed between them, no poet claims to have overheard, and the honest ones say so. But the shape of the asking survives, and the shape is this. She did not ask him to spare Endymion, and she did not ask him to exalt Endymion, and she certainly did not ask, as her sister once had, for the boy to live forever. She asked, in whatever words the moon uses for the picture, the breath going in and out, the face turned skyward, the changelessness of the sleeper, made not into one night's grace, but into the whole of a life. And one strand of the tradition adds a detail here that changes the flavor of everything it touches. So taste it carefully. In this strand, Zeus does not simply rule on the request. He goes down, or sends his will down, to the cave on Latmos, and he wakes Endymion, one last time, all the way, into the full cold clarity of midnight. And he offers him the choice itself, anything the king of gods says, in the way of fates. Choose your own. And the shepherd or the king or the hunter, this young man with the bells asleep below him and the silver watcher in his sky, thinks about it. We are not told for how long, and chooses sleep, everlasting, ageless, deathless sleep. He chooses the picture too, whether he chose it for love of her or love of rest, or because he had seen enough of how daylight ends things and wanted no ending. The fragments do not say. His reasons are the emptiest, most inviting room in the whole house of this story, and every listener gets to furnish it alone, in the dark, tonight. However the decision was reached, on Olympus or on the stone shelf, by decree or by petition, or by a shepherd's own drowsy nod, there came at last a final evening, and the story slows down for it, the way you are slowing down now, and we will let it. It is late summer on Latmos. The thyme has gone dry and aromatic on the slopes, so that every step of the descending flock releases a little gust of scent, and the limestone holds the day's warmth deep, like a kettle off the fire that will stay warm till morning. Endymion brings the sheep down for the last time, though in most tellings he does not know it is the last time, and perhaps it is better that way. Better that the final evening be an ordinary one, since ordinary evenings are what he is about to be given forever. He counts the flock through the gate, touching each greasy woolly back. He ties the hide strip. He eats his bread and his few olives, sitting on the flat rock, and shares a crust with the dog, and watches the gulf go from metal to slate to nothing. The nightjar starts up above the cave, churring its long dry song, and the wind moves in the thorn oaks. And then, just as it did on the night this story began, the wind stops all at once, and this time, you know what the hush is. It is the sky paying attention, the whole dark bowl of it leaning in. He yawns. It is such a small human thing, and it is the last thing. He settles onto the brush mat on the stone shelf, rolls his cloak under his head, mutters something to the dog that the dog does not need said. His breathing lengthens. The bells below him knock, once, twice, going quiet in the fold, little sparks of sound going out one by one, and his thoughts loosen the way yours are loosening, losing their edges, becoming weather, and somewhere between one breath and the next, without a seam, without a sound, without the smallest tremor to mark the border, sleep takes him, and this time it does not hand him back. That is all the change there is. No thunder, no transformation, no shining descent. A young man falls asleep on a mountain, exactly as he has done 1,000 times, and the 1,001st time is forever. If you had been watching, and in a way you are watching, you would have seen nothing at all, only perhaps that the night seemed suddenly deeper around the cave mouth, the way water seems deeper where it goes still, and that the dew came early, and that the moon, rising past the shoulder of the mountain, stopped. She comes down to a mountain that has been made in a single breath, entirely hers. There is no hurry in her now. That is the first gift of the new arrangement, and she discovers it slowly, standing at the edge of the shelf, watching him breathe. Every other night of her long existence has been a crossing, a discipline, a schedule of light, and love had to live in the margins of it, stolen in the slack hours, paid for with early settings and suspicious fishermen. Now the thing she loves is fixed, like a star given a body. The years may do their work on everything else on the mountain, on the fold and the paths and the thorn oaks and even the bells. And they will. But the face on the rolled cloak is outside the current, in a stillness the current cannot reach, and she can look at it for 100 years and lose nothing by looking. And she does, and loses nothing. The scar on his forearm stays half faded, exactly as time left it when time was dismissed. The single gray hair at his temple stays single. His breathing keeps its slow, deep tide, in and out, unhurried, unending, the calmest sound on the whole dark earth, and some nights she matches her light to it, brightening faintly as he inhales, dimming as he lets go, so that anyone far out on the gulf would have sworn the moon itself was breathing. And what does he know of all this inside? Here the old voices go quiet again, and the quiet is honest, because no one returns from that sleep with a report, but the tellers could not resist one word, and it is a beautiful one. They said he dreams, ageless, deathless, and dreaming. That is the formula that comes down to us, and one late writer even lets Selene say that she loves precisely this about him, that she gathers up his dreams the way a girl gathers fallen apples. What would a man dream forever on a warm stone, in the moon's full attention. Perhaps the mountain perfected. Flocks that never stray on slopes that never steepen, springs that never fail, evenings of bread and olives that never quite end. Perhaps her. It may be that inside the sleep she is not distant at all, that in the country of his dreaming they have all the conversations the waking versions never got, the whole marriage the myth withheld. Or perhaps he dreams as you are about to, without plot, without faces, drifting among shapes of warmth and belonging that dissolve when reached for and reform when released. The story does not say, will never say, and there is a mercy in that, because it leaves the door of his sleep unlatched, and any listener tonight may wander in. The world above the sleep, meanwhile, went on, because that is what worlds do, and the story keeps a few careful notes about how it went on. The dog waited. We can be gentle with this part. He waited the way dogs wait, completely, without philosophy, sleeping at his master's feet by night, and sitting sentry in the cave mouth by day. And the other shepherds of Latmos, who found the sleeper within a season, brought the dog scraps, and brought the flock down to their own folds, and stood in the cave mouth with their hats in their hands, understanding at once, in the way country people understand these things, that what lay on the shelf was not sickness, and not death, and not their business to disturb. They saw the dew silvering him harmlessly. They saw that no fly would land on his face, that no winter seemed to reach the shelf, though snow stood in the pass, that the nightjar kept its post on the rock above him all year round, though every other nightjar left with the warm weather. They drew the correct conclusion, which is that the mountain now had a holy thing in it, and they did what their grandchildren's grandchildren would still be doing centuries later. They kept the path to the cave clear, and kept their voices down near it, and told the story to strangers slowly with long pauses, exactly as it is being told to you. In time, the pauses filled with detail, as pauses will. The moon and her sleeper, the tale came to say, were not childless. 50 daughters were born to Selene and Endymion. 50. And if the number sounds impossible for a man who never wakes, remember what country this story lives in. The border country, where the moon can gather dreams like apples, and where a love conducted entirely across the border of sleep might still bear fruit on both sides of it. The daughters were called the Menai, the moons of the months, and to the ancient mind their number was not poetry but arithmetic, for 50 is close to the count of full moons in the span between one meeting of the great games and the next, the 4-year heartbeat by which Greece measured its shared time. Sit with that for a moment, drowsily, without effort. The tellers took the two of them, the goddess of the night sky and the man excused from time, and made their children the calendar. Every month that rose full over the harvest, every festival fixed by the moon's face, every span of years an athlete trained through, all of it was quietly reimagined as the offspring of one sleep on one mountain. Time itself, the story whispers, is what their love made, the very thing he was lifted out of, given back to the world as daughters. And it is the games, strangely enough, that lead the story home to its other country, because the great games were held at Olympia in Elis, and Elis, you will remember, is where a whole other family of tellings had planted Endymion from the beginning. Travelers who went to Elis in the old days and asked about him got a story with no mountain in it at all, or almost none. There, he was the king, son of a founder, himself a father of kings, and the Eleans would show you, at Olympia itself, at the starting line of the great stadium, the place where their Endymion was said to have set his own sons to race, with the kingdom itself as the prize, an inheritance decided at a run, which is the most Elean idea imaginable. And they would show you something else, and here you must hold the story's two halves apart with both hands, because they would show you his tomb. A grave, tended, named, believed. Ask on Latmos, and the answer was a cave and a breathing sleeper who will never need a grave. Ask in Elis, and the answer was a tomb and a finished, honored, entirely human life. One and the same name, and the ancient guidebooks record both claims side by side without blinking, noting simply that the people of Heraclea by Latmos say one thing, and the Eleans say another. And that is that. those inclined to weigh such disputes have never settled this one, and the disagreement itself may be the truest thing in the whole tradition, truer than either grave or cave. Because look at what the two answers are really saying. They are the two things humans have always said over a beloved body. He is gone, says Elis, gone properly and completely, and here is the stone that proves we loved him. He is not gone, says Latmos. He is only sleeping, and here is the mountain that proves it. Every funeral ever held has had both of those sentences in it somewhere, said or unsaid, and the Greeks, rather than choose, gave each sentence a landscape and let them stand a sea apart, forever answering each other. You do not have to choose either lying where you are. It may even be that sleep, your own ordinary nightly sleep, is the treaty between them, the little rehearsal of being gone that always ends with coming back, and that this is why the story of Endymion has been told at bedsides for so long, told quietly, told slowly, told to the very edge of sleep and then a little past it, the way it is being told now. Come back to the mountain then, for the long middle of forever, because that is the part of the story no one ever tells, and it is the part that belongs to this hour of the night. The years on Latmos begin to move the way clouds move on a windless day, imperceptibly. And then you look again, and everything has crossed the sky. The shepherds who found the sleeper grow old and hand the path down to their sons, who hand it to theirs, and the story stops being news and becomes a feature of the landscape, like the spring below the fold, marked on no map but known to every local foot. Girls about to be married walk up to the cave mouth and leave a comb or a ribbon on the flat rock for luck in love, since here, of all places, love is proven patient. Old men climb up more slowly in the last autumns of their lives and sit a while within sound of that endless breathing and come down looking eased, though they never say much about it. Mothers bring children who will not sleep and let them stand in the cave mouth in the moon-colored dark, and the children stare at the young man on the shelf, at the slow tide of his chest, and something in them surrenders, the way a small flame gives itself up to a bigger one, and they are asleep on their mother's shoulders before the path turns twice. The cave itself keeps its own weather now. Step inside it in any century you like, and the air is the same, cool without being cold, dry without being harsh, scented faintly with thyme and lanolin and something else underneath. Rainwater on silver, perhaps, the smell of her. Sound behaves gently in there. The bells of whatever flock grazes the slope arrive softened, rounded off, as if the cave were hearing them for you and passing along only what will not wake anyone. Moonlight enters it strangely, and the local people know this and do not remark on it, the way you stop remarking on a beautiful view you live inside. On nights when the moon stands nowhere near the cave mouth, her light is in there anyway, lying across the shelf of stone in a long silver bar, and it does not creep with the hours as lightened doorways must, but stays, steady as a hand resting on a sleeping chest, until dawn takes over the watch. For she still comes. That is the heart of the long middle, and the tellers who lived nearest the mountain insisted on it. The arrangement was never a shrine and a memory, never the moon moving on with her huge cold life, while a curiosity breathed in a hillside. Night after night, in the tellings of Heraclea's shepherds, she leaves the chariot standing and comes down, as she did the very first time, and sits at the end of the stone shelf and takes up the watching, which is to say the loving. For in this story, they were always the same act. She knows his face now beyond any possibility of learning, and watches anyway, the way you can know a piece of music to the last note and put it on again. Sometimes she straightens the cloak under his head, an adjustment no cloak has ever needed, made for the pleasure of making it. Sometimes she leans close to gather the night's dreams, and whatever she takes is replaced by morning, the way a spring refills. And sometimes on midsummer nights, when the whole sky is warm, she lies down along the shelf beside him, cool as the far side of the pillow, and the mountain holds perfectly still around the two of them, and the nightjar above the cave sings a shade more softly, and that is as much as the story will let anyone see, and more than it shows most. One late strand, a satirist, really, could not resist teasing her about all this, and the teasing preserved a tenderness nothing solemn could have. In it, the goddess of love herself raises an eyebrow at the arrangement and asks the moon what possible satisfaction there can be in a man who never wakes, never speaks, never so much as knows you are there. And the moon's answer, across all the centuries and all the translations, keeps its quiet dignity. You do not understand, she says, in effect. His sleep is not his absence. Come and watch him breathe, and then ask me again. The joke lands and does not land, because under it, the old question is still standing with its hand out. Is a love that is never returned, never even received, still love? Or is it only the most beautiful of vigils? The satirist grins and will not say. The shepherds of Latmos, who kept the path clear for 1,000 years, seem to have thought the question foolish. Everything on their mountain slept better because she came. If that is not a love returned, they might have said, what is? And still, beneath the vigils and the ribbons and the softened bells, the old fold in the story never comes out, the one pressed into it at the beginning, and this hour of the night is the right hour to hold it up to the light one last time, gently, without trying to iron it flat. Was the sleep a gift or a sentence? The ancient world, remember, kept every answer. He was punished for reaching above his portion, says one voice, and the unlined face is a cell with the softest walls ever built. He was spared, says another, plucked out of the current by a love that could not bear to watch the current take him. He chose, says a third, and the choice was offered by the King of Gods himself. And of everything on the table, thrones and triumphs, and long bright years, he took rest. Even the philosophers could not leave it alone. There was a saying that went around the old schools, half a riddle, asking what it would profit a man to be given endless life if he spent it asleep. For what, the riddle asks, does a sleeper actually have? He has no feasts, no friends, no mornings. He does not even have the moon, in any way he can know about. Take everything a life is made of, and subtract the knowing of it, and what remains on the table? And the riddle expects the answer nothing, expects you to shudder and choose the waking world with all its endings. And many listeners did, and do, but lie still and listen to the other side of the riddle, because it has one, and few tellers give it its turn. It answers with questions of its own, asked in a voice very like the hush before the moon rises. What does the waking man have, it asks, that his having does not spoil? He has mornings and spends them dreading noon. He has friends and loses them one by one, or is lost to them. He has feasts that end, loves that fray or are torn, a body that borrows all its strength at interest. Above all, he has the knowing, the famous knowing, and what he mostly knows is that it ends. The sleeper on Latmos is the one man in the world's whole story who was excused from that knowledge, relieved of the weight every other mortal carries up every hill of every afternoon. And if you want to understand what was lifted from him, you do not need philosophy. You only need to remember this very evening, whenever it was, an hour or a lifetime ago, when you first lay down where you are lying now. Remember the moment your body understood that nothing more would be asked of it until morning. That loosening, that laying down of the day like a full sack, finally off the shoulder. Now imagine that moment continued, not for a night, but as a fate, a permanent excuse from the whole examination, signed by the sky. That is what she asked for him, or what he chose, or what fell on him. The old voices could not agree on whether to envy it or grieve it. And if you drift off tonight before deciding, you will be in the very best company, 25 centuries deep. There is one more payment the story owes, and it settles its debts at this hour. You have been carrying, since the first evening, a hush, a night bird, and a dream, and you were promised they would come back. The hush you have seen for what it was, the sky's attention gathering around a chosen place, and it has fallen twice on the mountain, once when she first saw him, and once on the final evening, and the shepherds of Latmos say it falls there still, on certain nights, and that when every leaf on the thorn oaks stops at once, you should stand quietly, because the mountain is being looked at, and it is polite to be still while a guest is looking. The nightjar has kept its post all along, the little gray sentry that belongs half to this world, and the local children are taught its chirring song as a lullaby's proof. For as long as it sings above the cave, the arrangement holds, the sleeper is safe, the moon will come. And the dream of a silver woman standing at the edge of sleep, deciding whether to come in. That one was never only his. The people of that coast say she still makes her rounds of it, that on full moon nights the dream visits whoever sleeps outdoors on Latmos with an untroubled heart, and that it is nothing to fear, only the goddess counting her flock on the way to the cave, the way any good shepherd counts, touching each sleeper lightly as she passes 1 and 2 and 3 and you. Seasons keep their rounds on the mountain all the while, and it is worth lying inside one turn of them before the story leaves, because the sleeper has become their fixed point, the still peg the whole wheel turns on. In autumn the rains come up from the sea in soft gray processions, and the limestone darkens and drinks, and the cave stays dry, and the smell of wet thyme fills it like a censer. In winter the snow stands in the pass, and the flocks go down to the low country, and the mountain belongs to the wind and the sleeper and the moon, and her visits are longest then, the nights being longest, and the shepherds say the winter moon over Latmos is brighter than anywhere else on that coast, as a lamp is brighter in an empty room. In spring the slopes go briefly and extravagantly green, and new lambs stagger after the returning ewes, and the bells come back to the mountain like a tide coming in, and every lamb born within sound of the cave is said to be a quiet one, easy to raise, a good sleeper, and in summer the heat lies down on the stone all day like a cat, and rises off it all night, and the whole slope breathes warmth till morning. And the arrangement is at its most visible then, on the great full moons of midsummer, when the light stands in the cave mouth like a curtain, and the path up from the village is walked very slowly by whoever needs it that year. So the wheel turns, and he does not turn with it, and the strange thing, the thing the philosophers with their riddle never quite allowed for, is how little the mountain finds this sad. The fixed point is not outside the dance after all. It is what the dance is around. The story traveled, of course. Stories that good do not stay on one mountain. It went west with sailors and east with caravans, and it turns up wherever the old world painted or carved or sang about sleep. Bridegrooms heard it in wedding songs, sung softly near the end of the night, a promise that somewhere devotion had been made permanent. Mourners met it in a stranger place, on the carved marble of tombs, where the sleeping shepherd appears again and again with the moon descending toward him. And think what a thing that was to choose for a grave of all the scenes in all the myths. Whoever chose it was saying, as plainly as stone can say anything, that they had decided which of the two old sentences to believe. Not the tomb sentence, but the mountains. Not gone, but sleeping, and that they expected the light to keep coming down, night after night, to whoever lay inside. Poets in later ages could not put the story down either. One made the sleeper's name the title of a whole book of yearning, and filled it with a young man wandering after a light he can neither hold nor renounce. Another, in a colder century, let the moon envy her own myth, wishing she could love anything again so simply. Astronomers, who name what they find with whatever the old stories left lying about, fixed the names into the sky itself, so that if you know where to look through a telescope on a clear night, you can find, at the edge of one of the moon's great plains, a crater called after Endymion, a bowl of quiet gray stone where the sun rises and sets, and nothing ever wakes. The story has been kept, in other words, the way the shepherds kept the path, cleared and quiet and open, by hands that never met, for listeners not yet born, and tonight the path has led to you. And what should you carry back down it, before we let the mountain have its silence? Perhaps only this. Every night of your life, you have done a small, brave, ancient thing that this whole story is built around. You have lain down, closed your eyes, and handed yourself over. To sleep, which asks no questions. To time, which keeps moving while you are away, and which you trust, every single night, to be survivable, to hand you back a morning. The Greeks looked at that nightly surrender and saw how much it resembled the other, larger one that waits at the end of every mortal road, and they were honest enough to say so. They called Sleep and Death brothers, twin sons of night, one gentle, one final, alike as reflections. And then, having said that frightening thing, they told this story as if to apologize, as if to tuck the frightening thing in, because in this story, the gentle brother wins. In this story, a mortal is carried to the very border, to the last shelf of stone before the dark, and is not taken across, but is kept there, breathing, beloved, watched over forever at the edge and forever safe, with the whole night sky for a nurse. It is the kindest thing the old world ever imagined doing with a human being, and they imagined it happening in the dark, at the hour it is now. To someone very tired, lying very still, exactly as you are. So come back one last time to where we began, because the story is cyclical, as all the best night stories are, and it ends by walking its own path home. It is late on Latmos, later than it has ever been. The fold below the cave is quiet, the flock bedded down in its warm fog of lanolin, and the bells have stopped their knocking one by one, the way lit windows go out across a valley, until only a single bell sounds now and then, when some ewe shifts in her dreams, one small round note, and then the long soft nothing after it. The limestone is giving up the last of the day's heat under your back, a faint patient warmth, like a hand. The thyme you crushed on the path hours ago is still on the air, thinner now, mixed with dew. Above the cave, the night jar has gone quiet at last, its watch handed over, and the hush that lies on the mountain is the old hush, the attentive one, and it no longer stirs the hair on your arms, because you know now whose attention it is, and that it has never once in all the centuries meant harm to anything sleeping. The moon clears the shoulder of the mountain, and the pale stone answers her all down the slope, ridge after ridge, coming up silver out of the dark, until the whole flank of Latmos lies rinsed and shining, a second, dimmer moon for her to cross. Her light finds the cave mouth and enters it in the way the local people never remark on, and lies down in its long bar across the shelf of stone, across the rolled cloak, across the face that has not changed since the world was younger, and the slow tide of his breathing goes on, in and out, the calmest sound on earth, and you find, without meaning to, that your own breath has gone down to meet it, has matched it, long ago perhaps, somewhere in the middle of the story, so that the two of you have been breathing together for miles of telling, the sleeper and the listener, the kept one and the one being kept tonight. Far off and below, westward, the water of the old gulf lies flat under her crossing, holding a long path of light on its surface, the way it has held one every clear night since before there were names. And the fishing villages along it are dark, and the boats ride at anchor with their oars shipped, and everyone in all those rooms is doing what you are doing, letting go of a day. The stars stand in their old stations around her, dimmed a little by her nearness, and not resenting it. And between the stars and the water and the stone, there is nothing moving anywhere except breath. Hers in the light, if light breathes, his on the shelf, yours where you lie, three tides of the same quiet sea. She comes down. You can stay for this now. You have earned it. The story trusts you at its bedside. She leaves the chariot standing in the empty air, and the horses lower their long heads and doze, as they have learned to do over this one mountain. And she steps onto the slope with the light pooling around her ankles, and the time casts its two shadows, and the dew arrives early, silvering the wool of the sleeping flock, beating on the whiskers of a dog. Many dogs descended from the first, and no living thing on the mountain so much as stirs, because everything here was born inside this arrangement, and finds it as natural as gravity. She crosses the fold. She stops at the shelf, and she takes up the watching, which is the loving, at the point where she left it at dawn. The way you take up a piece of needlework, left on the arm of a chair, no seam showing, the thread never cut. One continuous attention now longer than every empire that rose and fell while she was paying it. Whether it began as a mercy, a sentence, or a shepherd's own drowsy choice, this is where every version was always going, and where every version quietly agrees at last. The disputes belong to the daylight, to the schools and the guidebooks, and the rival towns with their tomb and their cave. Night does not argue. Night simply shows you the picture, the one she asked to have held, the one the whole ancient world could not stop carving into the marble over its sleepers. A hillside, a flock, a young man breathing on warm stone. The moon come down to sit beside him, unhurried, unjealous of the hours, her light turned low the way a considerate person shades a lamp. Look at it for one more slow breath. Understand that it has been, in a sense, looking back at you all evening, that this story is itself a kind of Selene, an old patient light that comes down to people precisely when they are lying still with their eyes closed and watches over the first mile of their sleep and asks nothing. Let the picture begin to dim now, at its own pace, no hurry anywhere in it. The bells are silent in the fold. The nightjar sleeps, its long watch over. The gulf holds its bar of light without a ripple. The stars lean down the western sky, and the warm stone under everything gives up its last hour of the sun's heat to whatever is lying on it. A shepherd, a dog, a listener, all one flock now on one hillside in the dark. Your breathing is long and low, matched still to that older tide in the cave, and each breath out lets a little more of the day drain off into the limestone. The errands and the voices and the small unfinished worries, all of it soaking away like rain into a dry hill. Welcome, absorbed, gone. You do not need to hold anything anymore. The mountain is holding it. She is holding the mountain. And if, on the very edge of sleep, you feel something pass lightly over you, a coolness like the far side of the pillow, a brightness moving behind your closed lids, like moonlight crossing a wall, you will know what it is, because you have known since the bells first found you in the dark. It is only the goddess counting her flock on the way to the cave, touching each sleeper as she passes, 1 and 2 and 3, and you, and the count is never wrong, and no one is ever left out of it, and no one counted has ever been lost. The moon is over the mountain. The sleeper is breathing on his shelf of stone, ageless, deathless, dreaming, safe at the border forever. The sea is still. The stars are slow. The night is very long, and it is all yours, and there is nothing left to do in it but rest, as he rests, watched and warm and excused, breath by breath by breath, until morning finds you gently, in its own good time.